If you do get to speak, my best advice is don't start it off with, see here, it's like this. That's probably a bad way to start your speech.
Meet the Pressers with Matt Mallory and Klint Macro. Brought to you by Public Safety and Education and the Trigger Pressers Union. And now, your hosts.
Hello and welcome to Meet the Pressers. I'm Matt Mallory and this is my esteemed co-host, Klint Macro. And we're here about trigger pressers. We do a little bit of occasional gun reviews, blow stuff up. We talk about politics and faith, which is usually taboo in the industry, but hey, no options, right? Anyway, we've got an awesome guest today and Klint's going to introduce her and take it away, Klint.
We have a special guest today, Mary Callison. She was involved with the Million Moms Against Gun Control, and now she's quite involved with the DC project. Mary, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
This episode is brought to you by Mountain Man Medical. The right medical training and gear should be accessible to every American. Mantis. Mantis X helps shooters suck less. Meet the Pressers is sponsored by Next Level Training, Saber Red, Cutting Edge Bullets, the USCCA, ASP, Common Sense Self-Defense, and T1 Ammunition. Meet the Pressers is also generously supported by other fine companies, ranges, and our Patreon members. Thank you.
Why don't you give us the 10,000-foot view of your background and what got you into pro-gun activism?
Sure. So basically, it was right after Newtown when Obama had come out and paraded children across the stage saying, we're going to get rid of guns and this is for the children and we're taking it away and we're going to, register everything. My husband and I really started to look into purchasing as many different firearms and things that we could come up with that would be great for home defense and for carry. I think right at that point, Illinois had just gotten concealed carry. I think it was 2013. So it was we started to really delve into that. And I just happened one day to kind of go on the internet and I was looking for, pro-gun things, trying to get myself educated, trying to find other women that felt the way that I did. And I happened to stumble across 1 Million Moms Against Gun Control. And I thought, okay, this is me. The less laws on that, it's our constitutional right to carry. So I had messaged the founder, which was Heather Marchese at the time. And we got to talking and I started getting involved kind of at the Illinois, trying to go to our grassroots meetings here and basically just travel and try to get the word out to women about the importance of being able to keep our firearms and to be able to defend ourselves in situations. And during all that, you understood the importance of it, but not until my own sister was violently attacked in our own family home, August 29th of 2015, is when it really set in the importance of women, especially women, to be able to protect themselves and carry a firearm. She ended up being stabbed 17 times. She was beaten to the point of her orbital socket, blown out. Her face, her nose was broken, and then he sexually assaulted her in that home, and it was all within minutes. And just 2 weeks prior to that, we kind of talked about guns and going gun shopping, and you should probably, get your concealed carry and all this. And then 2 weeks later, that happened, and that really was the starting point of me getting a lot more serious about traveling, telling women, as many women as I could, about the importance of carrying guns and all that. And that's how I ended up meeting Diana. It was at NRA, and we got to talk, and a mutual friend of ours had said, Diana, you need to meet this girl and you need to hear her sister's story. And that's how I got involved with the DC project. And then, from there kind of spiraled into obviously traveling and DC and all that kind of stuff.
Wow. And your sister, how is she?
So it took a long time. Let's see, that was 15. So we're going on 5 years this August, actually the end of this month. And it was on my mom's birthday, so we'll never forget it. But she took a while to really recover, to kind of gain trust and going out with people and groups and everything. She purchased she got her first dog. So she got a big old German Shepherd I named him Trigger Wesson. So that's his name. That's awesome. Great German Shepherd as her companion. She's really, she's grown. She finally purchased a firearm, I think last year, and learning to use it even more, even though we'd go shooting, in the past. These were her steps to finally get that mentality right, to carry, to take her safety seriously. And then she is now an advocate as well. She's joined the DC Project. She goes to DC with us and shares her story. So she still fights a lot of demons. She still has those, there's nightmares. And I think all of us kind of have that as we think through what happened. But she's doing 10,000 times better than obviously that day.
That takes an amazing amount of courage. And I
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
Too often we see that people get involved with their own personal self-defense after some type of dynamic critical incident or some type of assault. Did that attacker go to jail?
Yes. And so this is the crazy part. She is so incredibly, we talk about situational awareness and recognizing details and all this kind of stuff. Even though he basically, it was unbelievable what I saw in that emergency room. He basically destroyed her. She remembered every single detail about this guy, like down to the year of the guy's car. And it was like insane. I had to call the media and be like, hey, your details are wrong. I'm literally getting from my sister what this guy, what they did. They caught him 4 days later, heading back to Indiana on, I think, an unrelated warrant. I forgot what it was, but he was a bad dude. He already had a record. We didn't find out a lot until we went to court at his sentencing. But yeah, they caught him. He's in jail. He's serving a 68-year prison sentence, which obviously for, nothing ever seems like enough. A fellow Leo wife's sister was stabbed to death in Elgin 2 years prior to my own sister, and the guy got 50 years. So that actually worried me when I heard his sentence, and knowing my sister survived, I was afraid the court system would be a little too lenient on him. But DuPage County, fantastic. They threw every possible felony, every possible thing they could at him to keep him behind bars. So
that's good to hear, because too often the elected officials drop the ball when it comes to those kind of things. And that's why so many criminals are out there in the street, because they were already in custody and some elected official just kind of let them go.
That's Cook County. We're my parents' house where they're at. I think they're 2 miles from the Cook County line. I'm like, thank God you're in DuPage, because it would have been horrible. It would have been a bad. I don't think you would have gotten all that time. It would have been probably like a slap on the wrist type of thing. Like, well, she survived, so he didn't really try to kill her,
Well, we can certainly assume that it would have been a much different outcome. I think that's fair to say. And that's something that a lot of people don't recognize as far as gun owners. If we are involved in any type of dynamic critical incident, that legal aftermath that we're sure to fight or try to protect ourselves from, those outcomes are going to be very different based upon the politics of where it took place.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that. And I think back to that day, and I'm like, I actually, and again, this is where that turning point, that day of where I became more serious about the way that I'm carrying, where I'm carrying, all those things. I pulled out of my driveway that morning, and it was, again, we were on my mom's birthday. We were headed to my grandma's house to celebrate. Pulled out of my driveway. I was living in Joliet at the time. Stopped in the middle of the road. I'm like, oh man, I don't have my gun with me. And it was like, that you kind of think about it. You're like, I'm going so-and-so, it's safe. My uncle's going, he's an officer too. My husband will be there eventually. He's an officer. It's like, we're all good. And then it was a rainy day. I literally drove past their road as it was happening, telling my boys to say, hey, hi to grandma's water tower, not knowing that my sister's literally down the street fighting for her life. Wow. If I had stopped there that day, I don't know what I would have done. There's no way I could have stopped it, at least in with my own strength or, with something I had. I don't know if I could have helped. So that's what crosses my mind every time I leave my house. Like, do I have my firearm with me? Do I have, such and such? Where am I going? You try to think about that, Carrie, all the time. I'm like, if women saw what I saw when we went to that emergency room, and I waited till she was cleaned up. I think I was so angry that I wasn't able to stop it. And I was right there. I couldn't see her till she was cleaned up. But when I walked into that emergency room and I saw what evil had done to my sister and what a firearm could have most likely in her situation stopped, every woman would have wanted a gun. Everybody that would have seen her face. And I carry her picture around, even just from the 3 days later. If women saw that, I'm like, I think women would be signing up left and right for learning how to shoot and understanding firearms better, because it changes you. It makes you like, this is what real evil does. I have seen it. We have a tool to protect us.
Yeah. Even pepper spray would be beneficial in a situation like that.
Yeah. And she fought. Yeah, she fought in her mind, because we're all kind of like that law. We watch too many law shows and everything else. Or, it's like, get the DNA. She literally pulled out some of his weave, I guess, because they found it in the kitchen, and was scratching him as best she can. And in her mind, it was, get any DNA and things possible under your fingernails. If I don't survive this, I've got to have something to catch this guy so he doesn't do it again. That was their thinking. But she tried. She fought as best she could. And I'm like, women, if you don't have a firearm, you got to learn how to do it with a non-firearm self-defense. So we push that as well. Anything you got to fight.
There's officers that I've trained and I've worked with that have literally say they don't carry off the job. It's less common now with everything going on, especially with the defund the police and all the the stuff going on with law enforcement. But some of the brothers and sisters that I work with have said to me, I don't carry it. I have it for the job. I don't. Why do I need it after? And it's changed. Thank God it's changed some. But I can just I've seen videos of officers not carrying and they end up getting got, and it's that time. And there had been times I even admit that there had been times in the past where my 45 and my hip was just a little too heavy, and I was I'm not going to carry it today. I'm just going to this house or that place. I'm going to the store quick, and I put it in the safe and lock it up. And that's one of my pushes to tell people I'd rather have somebody have a 22 on them than nothing. Yes. But a 9mm is a good gun. You're right in the middle there where it's not going to be too heavy or too light. It's going to have enough stopping power for a human that a 9 is a good middle of the road, or definitely a good
fantastic option. Although we have a 40 as well. We got a couple, but I go, when I couldn't find 9mm, at least I could find 40. So it was something to have on hand, especially if you're practicing and all that. But anything. I'm like, change your mindset. That's the big thing is you have to be in the mindset to carry. You have to be in the mindset to understand it. And I go, even after, how like after 9/11, everybody was like gung ho, pro America, all that. After a big event, it's the same thing in my sister's case. We started to put together self-defense programs and everything. We have great friends that have a dojo, and he's very they're pro gun, and they do a lot of things with self-defense, but what firearms, non-firearm self-defense. And women at the first couple of weeks were like, yes. And then after it's like, well, it happened to her, so it most likely won't happen to me. I'm going, well, it happened to my sister. It happened to our friend's family daughter that was murdered just a couple miles up the road. Our 14-year-old daughter interrupted a home invasion. And it happened to my fellow Leo wife's sister, murdered in Elgin 2 years prior to my sister. So I'm like, just because it happened to her does not guarantee it's not going to happen to you. So you got to figure this out and be prepared.
The analogy that I always use is seatbelt. In my classes, I'll say, how many of you guys put your seatbelt on while you're getting in a car accident? Anybody?
Right.
No. I mean, you don't know when it's going to happen. You do that to prepare in case it happens. You prepare for the worst.
I mean, you don't get to pick the time and a place that an attack is going to happen. Right. So you sure better be prepared for that.
And you have to be incredibly disciplined to maintain that lifestyle. There have been several times I've been 10 miles down the road and it's like, oh crap, I forgot my gun. And we turn around and my wife's like, really? I'm like, yes, really. And it's
don't
just
know.
Like, you don't know.
It can be one of those odd things.
Yeah, and if you listen to like Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman, he talks about how denial kills us many times. Yes. I cannot imagine surviving a violent encounter somehow, knowing that I left my gun at home. Yep. And seeing my wife or my family being victimized, knowing that I left my gun at home that day, and that thought is motivation.
It weighs heavy on you. It really does, and I think now you get a little weary. I think, you're preaching to the choir sometimes, like in our gun world, it's kind of like you're always talking to people within the gun world and it's like preaching to the choir and then you get weary about it and you just keep trying. But I got to keep remembering that it's like today, literally somewhere, another woman is going to continue to fight for her life or somebody's going to lose it. I have those tools. I have those, the friends within this world that could help them. How do we help them? And I think that's kind of what keeps me going, even on like the days where I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so much to do. Can I go to this rally again? It's like, no, you got to remember exactly that evil is there, doesn't take a break. And another woman today is going to fight like what my sister did. I don't want anybody else to go through that. I don't want to see, what anybody just deal with what we dealt with. It was rough. It was rough to see that. So you alluded to it a little bit. I think I'm assuming that they didn't know each other at all. It was just a random break-in. Correct. And she was there. Yep.
So that
he basically what the guy was from Indiana and he had come to get lost. Now he was just released from prison. He was prison fresh. Thank you to Obama's good boy, get out of jail early because you're a good boy. And he came to the house, he pulled in, he asked her for some money. She was outside literally getting ready to leave. And she's like, I don't have any money, you got to go. And he pulled out, she went inside and he pulled back in, and she'd already closed the door, locked the door, and was looking for a phone. Like her car was running, all her stuff was in there. He came to the door and knocked on it. She said she looked out the window, saw the wipers on his car going, and saw him like casing, but like the nervous hands and everything. And she said he knocked on the door, and they have a window on the one side of the door. She didn't open the door. She opened the window and asked, what do you want? And he's like, I need a phone. I got to call my mama or something like that. And she's like, I'm not giving you a phone. Go down the street to this, to the Dunkin' Donuts or whatever, use their phone. And who doesn't have a phone these days?
Right.
And
Obama
literally
phone.
2 kicks. Yeah, exactly. 2 kicks and he was through the door. And it was not the door jam that busted. It was the lock that exploded. And she goes, I just remember like seeing his hands coming through the door, and she's trying to push on it as best she could. And now you're talking a guy. I mean, the first time we saw him in court, I think it was a month later, the arraignment or whatnot. Was a very large guy, and he had prison fresh. I'm talking like that's all he did was probably pump iron in there. He was. Yep. I'm like, oh cow, you stop. You survived that. But yeah, she said it happened. It's within seconds. And she just kept fighting. It was throughout the whole house. He took her upstairs. He sexually assaulted her up there, brought her back down, and basically said he told the court like if he had knocked her out, she wouldn't remember him, and he could try to steal the money or whatever. He kept stabbing her when she wouldn't give him money, and basically just left her there in the kitchen to die. Told the courts he wasn't trying to kill her. I'm like, okay, you stabbed her 17 times. You're not trying to kill her? Okay. So
Jeez.
She got out. We don't know how. She, I asked if there was like footsteps. I'm like, did she like get carried out or something? Because there's no way. I walked it Wednesday. I think the cleaning crew kind of come through and clean stuff up, and I walked the house because we'd been at the hospital the whole time, so we kind of went back to take a shower, and it was very odd. But the amount of it was insanity. But she got out. She ran to the neighbor's house. The neighbor thought she hit her head on the pool, something like that, and they called 911. And the other thing that people don't realize is if you can't defend yourself and you're in this situation like she was in, it could take forever for an ambulance to get to you. Yeah. Not just the cops. It's that ambulance, the life-saving. Yeah, you could bleed out depending on where they stab. You're stabbed or whatnot or shot. You could bleed out within minutes. So thank God it took them forever. They called. Twice. They live on a dead end street, and so the ambulance couldn't come down obviously until the scene is cleared. So they're waiting for the police to clear the scene, and the neighbors are like, she's gonna die. Here she's bleeding and unrecognizable. And she knows our fire department guys very well. We all know our fire department there, and a lot of friends on that. And they didn't recognize her, which was it was crazy. So people need to realize again, not only the cops won't get there fast enough, but if you're not able to defend yourself, you may not survive because you're going to bleed out on the scene.
Well, the whole thought process on having a fire extinguisher, you have a fire extinguisher in the house, right, so that you can put out a fire before the fire department gets there, right? It's a tool that can save a life, just like a gun is, right? You're not expected to be a firefighter. You're not expected to be a cop,
right?
But both of those are tools. A fire extinguisher and a gun are tools that you can use to thwart that impending harm prior to first responders getting there.
Well, that's an amazing motivational story, certainly.
Yeah,
it is.
And, God bless your sister for continuing on, having a quality of life and advocating, personal defense and empowering other women to take control of their lives and become their own first responder.
It's pretty amazing to watch her tell that story. And she was in court and faced him when she gave her testimony on the stand too. And I'm just, I'm the big sister and all like, oh my gosh. And then to watch her, we went to last year was her first time in DC, and she went with us and was, I'm watching her interact with our legislators and everything and share the story. And it's very powerful. I'm just kind of like the messenger. I have, some, connections to help people in this, but I'm like, Mimi, it's your story that keeps me going to try to help people, and watching you do it. It's amazing. And I don't know how more women, hearing that would be turned off to getting the training they need to, possess a firearm and take their safety seriously, and the responsibility that it's not an officer, not somebody else's responsibility. It's your responsibility to defend yourself and stop that. So I don't know, but she's doing great. I'm very proud of her.
Yeah. Amen.
Moms Against Gun Control and DC project has a footprint in our nation's capital as far as, interacting and educating the elected officials there. You're in a very reasonably anti-gun state in Illinois.
Yeah.
Have you been doing a lot of work there at the state capitol with trying to change things in Illinois?
Right now, the big thing is our Floyd fight. Because of COVID, they've given the police the leeway to be able to halt or at least lessen getting cards out and licenses out, fast because they're of the virus and everything shut down. So I think there's a lot.
Just to clarify, the Floyd card
Yes.
is for any firearm, correct? It's not just a handgun.
Correct. So the Floyd card is so that you can buy a firearm and that you can possess it and you can buy ammunition. Then on top of that, you have to have a concealed carry license in order to carry your firearm outside the house or on you or whatnot in your respective areas. Like you can't do it on public transportation in Chicago. You can't do it in Cook County Forest Preserves. There's a whole other onslaught of rules.
Sure.
But yeah, basically we have to have 2 licenses in the state of Illinois in order to practice our right.
The really interesting thing that a lot of people don't understand is that Illinois used to be you couldn't have a gun. You could not have a pistol license. It was black on the map. And then because it went to the Supreme Court ruled that was unconstitutional and they opened it. But the funny thing is, and this is how politicians work, and this is what everybody should be aware of, is that they made the price so high that an average person is just going to say, it's not worth the money. I can't afford that. I don't want to spend it.
For an in-state, for us to pay for it, it's $150 plus tax. So
that's still pretty high.
Or whatever. It's like $153, whatever. On top of the Floyd card, which is 10. Now the fight is they're trying to make it. Our Floyd card is $10 for 10 years. They're trying to lessen it. Kathleen Willis was for $50 a Floyd card for only 5 years. So make it more expensive. Then you are pricing out anyone that some of the minorities in the areas such as Chicago that they do need to be able to defend themselves, and they're pricing them out of it. They can't afford to do it, and then they'll become a felon if they do.
Right.
So
now
it's horrible.
Comparing that to New York, now that $150 is just for the county fees, correct, or the state fees?
It's the state, right? It's the concealed carry license handgun fee.
So there's still 16 hours of range time, which is not free. Right. And then there's
you add into it. It's going to be some money. It depends on the class you take.
Right.
They range. It depends. I know 75 to 300, a range of depending on where you're going to take your classes at. And it's 8 hours of law and all that. For the Illinois law. Case studies, and then 8 hours of
range time.
Forgot the other stuff, some other things, and then you have to qualify as well. So then you've got to go to the range, and you've got to be able to qualify at 3 different distances. So it is. It's time consuming. A lot of hoops. It's expensive.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's cost prohibitive to a lot of people, and actually that's part of why my sister did not get her firearm earlier when we discussed it before. Her attack, because we sat there we literally sat there 2 weeks prior on my parents' steps, the one she was dragged upstairs through, and we sat there and said, hey, let's go gun shopping, let's get you training, let's go get our you need your concealed carry. But it was cost prohibitive. She was still at home. She was still paying off, college and everything else.
That narrative has to be pushed because those legislators that pushed that agenda are the reason he was victimized.
Yep.
Yeah, they need to
or one of the reasons.
Cost prohibitive, and that will kill people. They are literally killing people because they cannot defend themselves in any manner that they choose, which should be we should have the right to defend ourselves with a firearm, and it is. It's causing a lot of problems. So hopefully, I'm not an attorney, obviously, and I haven't filed any suits, but I'm hoping that starts to become more of a thing. They go after them for that as well.
Yeah, I would definitely look and see how many other examples there are like that, because that is, as you said, that's killing people. That's putting people at risk.
Yeah. And I know Rhonda Ezel is our fellow DC Project sister, and obviously she's got her case is always mentioned. But hopefully, she has so many contacts with that. So hopefully, again, with her being in our state, with us working together, she's fantastic, by the way. And Lori Blackwell and a few others within our state, my sister, obviously. And hopefully, we can start to work within our ISRA and kind of help them as that mom voice, that female voice with this, and say, hey, if this continues, you're going to continue killing people. This needs to change. We need We need change. We need these fees. They got to be dropped, or they got to be, I think there might be some other states that are a little more expensive than ours. So, but still, we should not have to pay a fee for our right to carry. It's insanity.
New York City is pretty expensive. It's like
pretty hefty.
$350.
Okay.
Upstate, it's $50 ish for the state fee. But you pay it to the county, and then there's about $100 fingerprinting fee, fingerprint and photo, and then the classes. Some counties have classes, some don't, but the classes range from free to $25 if the sheriffs do it. $50 is what I charge in most of the counties I teach in.
Yeah.
Some are 100, 125 because they require like live fire, like Cortland County.
Sure.
Pennsylvania,
So it really ranges in your state. Okay.
Pennsylvania's $20 and about 10 minutes and a background check, and that's it. And that is even a governmental overreach, in my opinion. There's no training requirement. I make a living training, and I'm absolutely against mandatory training for a number of different reasons. Dovetailing on your thought about local, statewide advocacy, just a bit of advice. You're talking about going down to the state capitol. Don't underestimate the power of setting up appointments at the local offices.
Right. Oh, that's true. You're right. I have
because if you can get a steady stream of people showing up at the local offices and scheduling time, that actually may have more impact than just a lobby day or something like that. Sure. And that's something that's a lot more affordable too.
Yes. Yeah. With our offices, I think one of mine is about 25 minutes away, our rep's office. That was another thing with the DC project, jumping into that. I have never done anything like this. Like, I jumped in like kind of that. I wasn't within the gun world, as I said. I wasn't an activist. It was like accidental activism, and it just kind of springboarded from there. So I'm still learning. You learn the governmental process is insane itself, like learning what goes where and how it all works. And so, going back, trying to do the DC model and the state level, I'm going, okay, we could do this. I could do this. I could talk to our legislators. It's a little intimidating. It's you really come out of your comfort zone. But I think that is the neat thing about here is now getting more people involved in this process. I think we're so far from understanding our governmental process. We just assume it's just done, and we don't know it. And then we lose our republic. We lose things if we don't get involved. So my fear, you get scared doing it because you're a little nervous talking to people, but then you have to understand, hey, if I don't do this, I'm not using what I was supposed to be doing in the first place, what our founders of this country were telling us we needed to be a part of. And so you got to get past the fear, share with people, get them involved. And yeah, you're right. At the local level, we should get a relationship set up with our local representatives. And that's what I think Diana has really been trying to help us push and do. And so, I get a little braver each time I talk to them and contact them, but it's a little intimidating.
Well, a couple things to remember. A, they're just people. They're not gods. That's one thing.
Exactly.
Number two, there definitely are some people that are pretty level-headed, and maybe they don't know anything about firearms. You just give them a little bit of education. They're like, hey, that makes a lot of sense. The thing is, for people that are just getting into it, I always recommend team up with someone else and go along with that person who wants to talk. Just having bodies in that room during that meeting is very impactful. And then
big difference.
The more you're around it and you hear it, then you can kind of take over some of those conversations yourself. But another thing is we always kind of steer away from the really vehemently anti-gun people. Go visit them too.
Yes.
Be a pain in their ass and get to understand and recognize their talking points.
Yes.
Because they all play off of the same index cards. And then
we try in DC with that. Yeah.
Once you know where they're going to go with their arguments and you can throw them off, they don't know what to do once they're off script.
Yeah.
And I always look at it this way.
I know. Yeah.
If I go into an
He's on a roll, man. He's on a roll.
Anti-gun legislator's office, I can't lose. Like, what's the worst? I'm not going to make them more anti-gun. And if for any other reason, it gives me an opportunity to have another rep and get some of those butterflies out so that when I do get in front of someone who might go towards the light of liberty, I've got some range time in, so to speak.
Yes. No, we tried that. And obviously with Illinois, it's weird. Obviously both of our federal senators, they are both quite anti-gun. And I know that Rhonda and Lori have tried in DC to be able to sit down with them when they're there. It's hard to get appointments with your representatives and senators if they are anti-gun. You will always meet with their staff members, which is not a bad thing, because you hear their points, and you start to understand where they're coming from, how to talk to them, how to do it in a non-threatening way that you can actually have a conversation. But yeah, we keep trying. The funny thing is, Illinois, it's really a Republican or more conservative than people think. I think you hear Chicago and you think, oh my gosh, that state it's completely Democratic. There is, nothing. We actually have quite a fight in our state right now, especially with the COVID stuff. Our representatives that are outside of Chicago are fantastic, and they are very pro-liberty, very pro-constitution, very conservative in terms of things. Even I think we've got one Democrat representative towards the Iowa border. I've got to look again. But it's actually a pretty conservative state, considering Chicago just gives the rest of the state a really bad name. So if that could just become the 51st state, would be great.
Well, I mean, with no electoral college in the states,
right.
It's the cities rule the roost. And you're absolutely right. Just because someone has a D next to their name does not mean that they're going to be anti-gun or anti-liberty, although a lot of Ds are. I mean, that's certainly the case. But just because someone has an R next to their name.
You got to change the rhetoric when it comes to how you're discussing gun owners, because there are a lot of Democratic and a lot of liberal gun owners. And what I see, especially in monitoring and doing our pages, is the way that pro-gun people will speak about certain demographics and stuff. And you have to understand, you'll start to alienate them even more. And then we are not coming together, whatsoever.
Agreed.
So you have, everybody's like, you're a Democrat, liberal, you're an anti-gun. Not necessarily. Just you have to use the correct verbiage and stop alienating all these different groups. Work together on it, whether you're a liberal or Democrat or Republican. Who the heck cares? But you got to come together on it. The 2A here. All else be damned at this point. Come together.
Harumph.
So stop alienating people. So we try to preach a lot on that. We're the way that you're speaking to those that you don't agree with. The conversations you have, it may change drastically if you just talk to them just as a human being. Don't put them in a category. Whatever they might be, to stop labeling them, just talk, come to the understanding of whatnot and, move on together. So
it goes
that's
the
what
same.
I've noticed a lot of.
It goes the same way with teaching, with because of the riots and COVID and everything. I've had an influx. I know Clint's had some too, an influx of students, and I've had a lot of students in the class that I normally wouldn't get in the class that are Democrat, liberal, that were anti-gun prior, and now they're actually thinking, crap, these rioters are coming from my house, and they don't care if I got a D on my door or not. So in the class, I'm not going to be sitting there making funny jokes. I used to make a joke about our former vice president, Crazy Uncle Joe, standing out shooting into the night sky. You don't want to shoot blindly into the night sky. That's bad advice, and they should take his SU degree away. Well, I stopped saying that because I know I've got some people in the class that are probably going to be voting for
Biden supporters.
Joe Biden.
My name is Kim Stolfer. I'm president of Firearms Owners Against Crime. I'm out here exercising my Second Amendment rights, as I've done for the last 65 years. The right to bear arms is a civil right, not meant for negotiation, as some politicians would have you believe. So if you believe in the Second Amendment, you believe in individual liberties, please get involved now. Make sure your friends are registered to vote. Because on November 4th, if we don't do what we need to do, we're all going to pay the price.
Yeah, could you tell everyone how to get in touch with you and follow what you're doing and all that kind of stuff?
So you can find, so the DC Project is our big one. We're really trying to work, obviously, on that. So you can go to dcproject.info. You can sign up through them. You can follow along. They're on Facebook as the DC Project. 1 Million Moms. Ours is just 1 Million Moms Against Gun Control on Facebook, or 1mmagc.org.
We're definitely glad to have you on. It's been fun.
Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.
There's a lot of sponsors to make this show possible, like Mantis.
Make sure you check them out and give them your business.
This episode is brought to you by Mountain Man Medical. The right medical training and gear should be accessible to every American. Mantis. Mantis X helps shooters suck less. Meet the Pressers is sponsored by Next Level Training, Saber Red, Cutting Edge Bullets, the USCCA, ASP, Common Sense Self-Defense, and T1 Ammunition. Meet the Pressers is also generously supported by other fine companies, ranges, and our Patreon members. Thank you.
Thanks for watching the show.
Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share, click the little bell. come on Patreon, help support us that way. Come to one of our classes or host us. We can come to you and do one of our courses at your location.
So until next time,
Adieu.
Thank you for watching Meet the Pressers.